Welcome to Bedtime Science. Tonight we travel to the Yamal Peninsula, where winter temperatures fall below -50 degrees Celsius, and a people called the Nenets have lived with their reindeer herds for thousands of years, not by fighting the cold, by understanding it. Before we begin our journey, did you know that reindeer hair is hollow? Each strand contains a tiny sealed tube of trapped air, functioning like a microscopic double-glazed window across the animal's entire body. The measured thermal conductivity of a reindeer pelt sits at 0.07 watts per meter per degree Celsius. A high-quality synthetic foam sleeping pad. That scores 0.083. The animal beats the factory. Or that the Nenets' word for their tent, chum, describes a structure two people can assemble in 45 minutes, yet it withstands winds that would flatten a modern camping tent. Its conical shape isn't decorative. It solves a precise set of fluid dynamics problems that Western engineers didn't formally describe until the 20th century. Or that in the polar night of the Yamal Peninsula, the sun doesn't rise for nearly 2 months, and yet families with children as young as 3 continue to migrate across open tundra with herds numbering in the thousands. They don't stop, they walk. Tonight, we will gently explore the layers of survival in the Siberian winter. First, the engineering hidden inside reindeer fur and the clothing the Nenets sew from it. Second, the architecture of the chum, a conical tent heated by a single fire, where smoke, warmth, and freezing air are managed with precise geometry. Third, the diet that keeps the body warm and disease-free when no plant grows for 6 months. And fourth, the biology of darkness, cold-adapted bodies, and the deep quiet of the tundra in winter. Before we begin, if you find comfort here tonight, please consider subscribing to join our quiet community. Or, if you are still awake, leave a soft comment below about what other survival science you would like us to explore next. Let us begin where warmth begins, with fur. The winter coat of a reindeer, known by its Latin name Rangifer tarandus, has 2 structural layers. The outer layer consists of long, thick guard hairs. The inner layer is a dense mat of fine underfur. Each performs a different thermal function. Together, they create what researchers have compared to a biological aerogel, a material so effective at blocking heat loss that snow accumulates on a standing reindeer's back without melting. Worth sitting with, that detail. Snow lands on the animal. It stays frozen. It never melts. The reindeer's body heat simply doesn't reach the surface of its own coat. The guard hairs hold the secret. Unlike the solid filaments of most mammalian hair, reindeer guard hairs contain air-filled cavities separated by thin keratin membranes. These form a multi-chambered structure inside each hair shaft, and the cavities trap still air. Still air is the poorest conductor of heat available in nature. Wind can't displace it from inside the sealed keratin shell. Picture each hair as a tiny sealed glass tube with protein walls. Air sits inside. Cold presses against the outside. Heat from below never reaches the surface because air, when it can't move, barely conducts heat at all. The underfur handles a different problem. While the guard hairs block conductive heat loss, the underfur prevents convective movement of air within the coat. In cold and windy conditions, convection, the physical circulation of air, actually drains more heat from a living animal than conduction does. The underfur packs so densely that air simply can't circulate between the skin's surface and the outer guard layer. Engineers call the pumping of cold air through a garment during movement the bellows effect. The underfur eliminates it. Guard hair density varies by body region. Researchers have counted approximately 2,000 hairs per square centimeter on the forelegs. On the back, roughly 1,700 per square centimeter, with individual hairs reaching up to 30 millimeters long. The combined result: insulation so effective that the animal's metabolic cost of staying warm at -62 degrees Celsius is no greater than it would be in mild weather. Let that number register: -62. The hollow hair system eliminates the thermal burden entirely. Your reindeer doesn't need to burn extra calories to stay warm at a temperature where exposed human skin suffers frostbite in minutes. And here's the thing: modern engineers have been studying this structure closely. Researchers at Lanzhou University and the Chinese Academy of Sciences, in work published between 2024 and 2026, developed hollow graphene aerogel fibers, synthetic threads, that achieved a thermal conductivity of just 1.28 milliwatts per meter per Kelvin under vacuum. That's a record for graphene-based aerogels. The design rationale was described explicitly as biomimetic, derived from the hollow hair architecture of polar bears and reindeer. The engineers didn't invent the principle, they copied it. But the reindeer solved this problem first, across millions of years of selection pressure applied by the cold. No laboratory, no grant funding, just survival winter after winter. The Nenets observed this, then they wore it. The traditional malitsa is a hooded pullover coat with attached mittens, sewn from 5 or 6 complete reindeer skins. The construction principle is deliberately biomimetic. The coat distributes reindeer skin across the human body in the same anatomical arrangement as the reindeer itself wears it. Leg skins become boots and hood. Body skins form the main coat. Fawn skins line the inner boot. The entire animal's thermal solution, transferred anatomically intact to the human wearer. The fur is turned inward, against bare skin. This might seem counterintuitive, but it's thermodynamically precise. Those hollow guard hairs act as microscopic wicks. They transport moisture from the skin's surface outward through their hollow cores via capillary action. This prevents sweat from pooling against the skin, which would pull heat away fast. The hairs also press tightly against the body's contours, eliminating the convective air gap that exists between modern garments and skin. The coat's shape concentrates its greatest thermal mass over the torso, the back, chest, and sides, where core temperature protection matters most. Thermal insulation testing of Arctic protective clothing, using a thermal mannequin, measured effective insulation values of 1.9 to 2.3 kilo for standard cold weather ensembles. The minimum industry standard for cold protective clothing is set at 2 kilo. Wind at 4 meters per second cuts total thermal insulation by 26 to 35%. Russian scientists who field-tested the malitsa called it a real set transformer. During the day, it's a coat for herding. At night, the wearer removes the belt, ties the coat at the knees, and it becomes a sleeping bag. No extra gear, no second system. And there's one detail that reads like fiction but is documented. The hollow reindeer hairs provide enough buoyancy to keep the wearer afloat if they break through river ice. This isn't a rare hazard during migration. Rivers must be crossed. Ice isn't always reliable. The malitsa doubles as a life jacket. Skin temperature inside the garment stays within a few degrees of normal comfort, even when the exterior drops below -50. The malitsa keeps the body warm, but a body needs shelter too. Now let's look at the structure that holds warmth in the open tundra. The chum appears at first glance to be the simplest possible shelter. A cone of poles covered in animal hides, a fire in the middle, an opening at the top. It's not simple. It answers a precise set of physics problems. The structural frame consists of 25 to 40 poles arranged in a circle and lean together at the apex. In winter, the frame gets covered with sewn reindeer hides. A small adjustable opening remains at the top, and this opening performs the central engineering function of the entire shelter. The floor is insulated with wooden planks or additional reindeer skins laid over the frozen ground. The complete assembly can be taken down, loaded onto reindeer-drawn sledges, transported to the next campsite, and rebuilt, all within a few hours. Every 3 to 5 days, the whole camp moves. The physical mechanism that makes the chum work is called the stack effect. This is the same principle that governs every chimney built in every house, in every country, across the entire history of fire. Hot combustion gases are less dense than cold air. Being lighter, they rise. As heated air ascends through the interior cone and exits through the apex opening, it creates a zone of lower pressure at the base. This lower pressure draws fresh air in along the ground perimeter. The taller the structure, the greater the pressure differential, the stronger the natural draft. But here's what matters about the cone shape. The narrowing cross-section toward the apex accelerates the ascending column of hot gas. This is called the Venturi effect, the same principle that makes air speed up when forced through a narrow passage. That acceleration increases draft velocity and carries smoke more efficiently out of the opening. Even in still conditions with zero wind, the geometry of the cone creates its own airflow. Field measurements in comparable hot tent designs, tipi-style structures with a single central stove, have recorded temperatures of approximately minus 26 degrees Celsius outside and plus 48 degrees Celsius at the tent apex, a differential of 74 degrees across the wall. At ground level, where people rest and breathe, temperatures sit between 20 and 25 degrees Celsius. Comfortable, livable. The physics of stratification explain why smoke doesn't fill the living space. Cold, dense air settles near the floor where people lie down. Hot smoke ascends through the upper cone and exits through the apex. The occupants breathe at the cold air layer. The smoke column passes above them. Adjusting the size of the apex opening lets the occupants regulate both the fire's oxygen supply and the rate of heat loss. It's a passive heating, ventilation, and cooling system. No moving parts, no electricity. And in Arctic winter conditions, the extreme cold outside actually helps. The greater the temperature gap between the hot interior and the freezing exterior, the stronger the natural draft. The cold itself improves the shelter's ventilation efficiency. At minus 50, the chum draws better than at minus 10. 2 layers of hide cover are sometimes used in the coldest conditions. Documentation suggests a double layer arrangement can approximately double the relative temperature rise per watt of heat input from the fire. The smoke hole at the apex is managed with hide flaps drawn in or out by cords. The orientation of these flaps shifts relative to wind direction. When a metal stove pipe runs through the hole, it passes through with a tight ring-shaped gap to minimize heat escaping around the pipe's edge. The entire structure, poles, hides, stove, floor covering, can be disassembled, packed, and moved within hours. It has been moved this way across this terrain for thousands of years. Consider this about the chum. It wasn't drawn on paper first. It wasn't modeled in software. It was tested winter after winter by the only criterion that mattered. Did the family survive? If the cone was too wide, smoke filled the living space. Too narrow and it couldn't hold enough people. If the opening was too large, heat escaped. Too small and the fire choked. Every proportion was refined by use. What remains today is what worked. Warmth from clothing and shelter addresses heat loss, but the body also needs fuel. In a terrain without plants for half the year, that fuel comes from unexpected sources. The Yamal Peninsula is biologically barren in winter. For up to 6 months, no plant food grows. A diet with zero plant matter would typically produce scurvy within weeks. That's severe vitamin C deficiency, causing collagen breakdown, hemorrhaging, and death. Arctic explorers who relied on cooked rations died of scurvy, while Nenets families living nearby stayed healthy. The difference wasn't willpower, it was chemistry. Vitamin C, or ascorbic acid, is the single most heat-sensitive vitamin known to food science. In laboratory testing, boiling destroys between 6 and 93% of ascorbic acid content. Frying causes losses of 33 to 95%. Even steaming destroys 5 to 92%. The destruction mechanism is oxidative. Ascorbic acid reacts with dissolved oxygen at high temperatures and converts irreversibly to inactive compounds. Cooking nearly eliminates vitamin C from meat. Freezing, by contrast, preserves it fully. The USDA confirms that the freezing process itself doesn't destroy nutrients in meat. Ascorbic acid in fresh frozen tissue stays stable because the absence of heat eliminates the oxidative degradation pathway, and the absence of liquid water prevents leaching. The primary vitamin C source in the traditional Nenets diet isn't muscle meat. It's organ meat, particularly liver. Analysis of caribou liver, closely related to reindeer, measured 23.76 milligrams of vitamin C per 100 grams. Caribou muscle meat contained only 0.86 milligrams per 100 grams. The liver carries roughly 28 times more vitamin C than the muscle. Reindeer liver measured approximately 11.88 milligrams per 100 grams. The minimum daily intake to prevent scurvy sits around 10 to 15 milligrams. A single serving of raw reindeer liver meets or exceeds that threshold. Stroganina, raw frozen fish or meat shaved into thin curls with a knife, is the traditional preparation that preserves this vitamin C. The food is caught or slaughtered, frozen by the ambient cold, and sliced, eaten before any heat touches it. The explorer Vilhjalmur Stefansson documented curing 3 cases of scurvy within 3 weeks using raw frozen meat alone. Only frozen and unboiled meat produced the curing effect. Cooked meat, at the quantities consumed, couldn't do it. But preventing scurvy is only the beginning of what vitamin C does in this environment. Its deeper role connects to the body's ability to burn fat for heat, and that connection runs through a molecule called carnitine. Carnitine is a small molecule with a precise and narrow role. It's a shuttle. Long-chain fatty acids, the primary energy substrate in a high-fat Arctic diet, can't cross the inner mitochondrial membrane on their own. They're too large. Carnitine binds to the fatty acid, carries the complex across the membrane, and releases it inside the mitochondrion where beta oxidation occurs. Without adequate carnitine, Long-chain fatty acids queue up in the cell's outer compartment. They can't be burned. Heat can't be produced from dietary fat. Vitamin C is a required cofactor for the two enzymatic steps that synthesize carnitine inside the body. The first enzyme, trimethylcyanine hydroxylase, needs ascorbic acid to function. The final enzyme, gamma-butyrobutane hydroxylase, also needs ascorbic acid. No vitamin C, no carnitine synthesis. No carnitine, no fat transport into mitochondria. No fat transport, no beta oxidation. No beta oxidation, no heat. The chain is that direct. A controlled human trial measured this quantitatively. Individuals with even marginal vitamin C status, not frank deficiency, just insufficiency, oxidized 25% less fat per kilogram of body weight during a 60-minute walking test compared to adequately nourished subjects. When those depleted subjects were given vitamin C, their fat energy expenditure increased fourfold. For a Nenets herder surviving on reindeer fat, relying on diet-induced thermogenesis to maintain core temperature at -40, a 25% deficit in fat oxidation isn't a minor inconvenience. It's the margin between staying warm and hypothermia. The metabolic arc runs like this. Raw frozen liver and organs deliver preserved vitamin C. That vitamin C provides the cofactor needed to synthesize carnitine. Carnitine transports dietary fatty acids into mitochondria. Inside the mitochondria, beta oxidation breaks those fatty acids down, releasing energy as heat and ATP. Stroganina isn't a delicacy. It's a metabolic delivery mechanism. And the warmth that herders feel after eating raw meat, that flush of heat through the core, comes from diet-induced thermogenesis, not from the caloric content of the vitamin C itself, which is negligible, but from the downstream cascade it enables. The fat burns, the body warms. The same vitamin C also acts as an antioxidant. During high metabolic output in cold exposure, when mitochondria are running at elevated capacity, reactive oxygen species accumulate. Ascorbic acid helps neutralize them, limiting oxidative damage to the very membranes and enzymes generating the heat. The Nenets didn't describe this in biochemical terms. They described it in practical ones. You eat the liver raw, you eat the fish frozen, you stay warm. The ones who didn't, well, they didn't pass their habits on. Those observations describe how the body fuels itself in the cold. Now let's look at deeper biological adaptations, changes not in behavior but in the body's own tissue. The defining biological distinction of cold-adapted humans isn't their clothing or diet. It's a type of fat that burns rather than stores. Brown adipose tissue, or BAT, is a specialized thermogenic tissue distributed primarily around the neck, collarbone, and upper back. Unlike white fat, which stockpiles energy for later use, brown fat is packed with mitochondria. Those mitochondria express a protein called uncoupling protein 1, or UCP1. This protein does something unusual. It uncouples the mitochondrial proton gradient from ATP synthesis. The energy that would normally be stored as chemical fuel gets released directly as heat. Brown fat is a furnace, silent, internal. A 2022 study compared Yakut young adults, indigenous Siberians, against Americans living near Chicago. During mild cooling, the Yakut participants were far less likely to shiver. They showed substantially greater evidence of brown fat thermogenesis. Warmer skin temperatures above the collarbone. the clinical marker for active brown fat, were recorded in the Yakut group, along with a higher gap between measured resting metabolic rate and predicted values. Their bodies were generating measurably more heat at rest, without shivering, without muscular effort, powered by brown fat alone. A 2025 study focused on Yakut gene variants found that specific polymorphisms in the UCP1 and UCP3 genes carried the highest scores for cold adaptation traits in the Yakusha population. These variants are now shown to be under positive natural selection at high latitudes. The frequency of high thermogenesis UCP1 gene variants correlates with latitude. The further north the population, the more prevalent the heat-generating version of the gene. Cold selected for these variants. Over thousands of years, individuals whose brown fat burned hotter survived more winters, had more children, passed the trait forward. Beyond brown fat, the Yakut maintain a chronically elevated basal metabolic rate. A foundational study measuring BMR in 75 Yakut women and 50 Yakut men found their measured BMR was elevated by 6.5% compared to predictions based on body mass alone. Elevated levels of thyroid hormones, particularly T3 and T4, are the primary driver. These hormones promote increased heat production throughout the entire body by upregulating oxidative metabolism in essentially all tissues. Seasonal variation adds another layer. A study measuring Yakut BMR in both summer and winter found that younger adults showed a 6% elevation in wintertime BMR compared to summer. But here's the paradox. Free T3 and T4 levels actually declined during winter, even as metabolic rate increased. The body was consuming thyroid hormones faster than production could replace them under sustained cold stress. The engine was running hotter, burning through its fuel supply. Greater participation in subsistence activities, reindeer herding, hunting, outdoor labor, was among the strongest predictors of elevated BMR and fat oxidation in men. Then there's the vascular adaptation. In most people, extreme cold triggers vasoconstriction. Blood vessels in the hands and feet narrow, redirecting warm blood to the core. Your fingers go numb. Your toes ache. The body chooses to sacrifice the extremities to protect the organs. Indigenous Siberians have evolved a different strategy entirely. A rigorous 2023 study compared Tuvan pastoralist adults from south-central Siberia against matched Western European controls. During whole-body cold exposure at 10 degrees Celsius, the forearm to fingertip skin temperature gradient, a measure of how much the body constricts peripheral blood vessels, was 0 degrees in Tuvans, 0, versus 8.8 degrees in Europeans. The Tuvans barely constricted at all. When subjected to a more extreme test, plunging a finger into ice water for 30 minutes, 92% of Tuvans showed a cold-induced vasodilation response. Only 36% of Europeans did. Tuvan fingers remained at an average of 13.4 degrees Celsius. European fingers dropped to 3.9 degrees. Think about what that means in practical terms. Enhanced peripheral blood flow preserves manual dexterity. It prevents cold injuries. It makes fine motor tasks, tending fires, repairing harness straps, stitching torn hides, possible in temperatures where most people's hands would be useless. These adaptations describe what happens inside the human body. Now let's turn to the animal at the center of this entire system, the reindeer, and a piece of engineering hidden inside its nose. The reindeer nose is one of the most studied thermoregulatory structures in mammalian biology. Its function depends on a countercurrent heat exchange system in the nasal cavity. Here's how it works. When a reindeer inhales at -40 degrees, air passes over complex scroll-shaped structures called turbinates that line the nasal cavity. These turbinates are covered in mucosa maintained at body temperature. As cold air flows over this warm, moist surface, heat and water transfer from the mucosa to the incoming air. The air warms. The mucosa cools. By the time the air reaches the lungs, it's close to body temperature. The lungs never feel the cold. On exhalation, the process reverses. Warm, moist air from the lungs passes back over the now cooled mucosal surfaces. The exhaled air surrenders its heat and water back to the mucosa. Thermal recovery. At ambient temperatures of -5.5 degrees Celsius, exhaled air temperature was already an average of 21 degrees below body temperature. At the lowest tested temperatures, approximately 75% of heat and 80% of water added to inspired air were recovered before the exhaled breath left the body. 75% heat recovery, 80% water retention from a nose. The vascular anatomy that enables this is layered and precise. The nasal mucosa contains a network of frequently interconnected arteries running the full length of the nasal turbinates, positioned in intimate contact with an equally complex venous network. During heat conservation, blood flows in opposite directions through these paired vessels, maintaining a temperature gradient along the mucosa. During heat dissipation, after hard running, for instance, the blood flow switches direction, reducing the gradient and allowing heat to escape. Cooled venous blood returning from the nose can be routed two ways. It can enter the general circulation to cool the whole body, or it can flow through the cavernous sinus around the carotid radi, a network of vessels near the brain, for selective brain cooling. The reindeer can manage its core body temperature and brain temperature semi-independently. A computational fluid dynamics study confirmed that reindeer nasal geometry produces approximately 20% less entropy, less wasted energy, than a simplified uniform geometry model at ambient temperatures of -30 degrees. The complex turbinate structure becomes progressively more thermodynamically efficient at exactly the temperatures where efficiency matters most. The colder it gets, the better the nose works. Reindeer eyes carry another adaptation invisible to casual observation. Between summer and winter, they physically restructure themselves. The tapetum lucidum, the reflective layer behind the retina that amplifies incoming light, shifts its spectral reflectance from gold turquoise in summer to deep blue in winter. This change is driven by alterations in the collagen fibril spacing of the tapetum's photonic crystal structure, triggered by changes in intraocular pressure caused by prolonged pupil dilation in the darkness. The biological logic is precise. Summer's golden tapetum reflects broadly across the visible spectrum. The winter blue tapetum is tuned to match the peak spectral quality of Arctic twilight, the blue-dominated, ultraviolet-rich light scattered by the atmosphere when the sun sits just below the horizon. Reindeer experience 8 to 11 hours of this blue twilight daily from early September through April. In summer, the tapetum reflects more than 95% of light directly back through the retina. In winter, only about 40% is reflected, but that reflected light is spectrally optimized for maximum contrast detection in a blue UV environment. The winter tapetum also extends sensitivity into the ultraviolet range, around 350 nanometers. This allows reindeer to detect urine marks, predator tracks, and lichen patches that are invisible to human eyes against the snow. A wolf's track, a patch of food, all visible, all in a spectrum we can't see. Reindeer hooves undergo their own seasonal transformation. In summer, the hoof pads are soft and spongy, providing traction on wet tundra. In winter, the pads shrink and tighten, exposing the sharp rim of the hoof for grip on ice. The hardened edges also become effective digging tools for excavating lichen beneath the snow. That lichen, Cladonia rangiferina, commonly called reindeer moss, is rich in carbohydrates but low in protein. The reindeer's digestive system is specifically adapted to extract maximum energy from it. And the whole reindeer metabolism slows in winter, even when food is available. Energy demand drops during months when caloric resources are scarce. The animal adjusts, not by working harder, by needing less. This seasonal slowdown in the reindeer connects to a broader biological pattern that applies to the herders as well. Let's look at what happens inside the human brain when the sun disappears. The human circadian system is anchored by light. Bright spectrum light entering the eye each morning triggers a tiny cluster of neurons in the hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the SCN, to reset the body clock to a 24-hour rhythm. The SCN then regulates melatonin release from the pineal gland. Light suppresses melatonin. Darkness triggers it. When the sun vanishes for weeks or months, that anchor is gone. Research consistently shows that the loss of natural daylight induces a delayed chronotype. People go to bed later. They wake later. Their entire internal clock drifts toward what researchers describe as permanent night mode. A key study tracked 82 men through an Antarctic winter. It measured chronotype quarterly as daylight ranged from 18.6 hours in March to 0 in July. During polar night, the midpoint of rest shifted later. Social jet lag increased. Workday rest duration declined, despite participants following a fixed schedule. Even robust social cues, structured work timetables, scheduled meals couldn't fully compensate for the loss of light as a Zeitgeber. That word Zeitgeber comes from German. It means time giver. Light is the primary one. Without it, the clock wanders. Long-term daylight deprivation also changes the eye itself. A 2018 study published in Nature Scientific Reports, conducted on Antarctic overwintering crews, found that retinal sensitivity to rod-driven, cone-driven, and blue light conditions all increased during the dark period. The retina essentially turned up its own game, upregulating sensitivity to catch every available photon. The dim glow of snow, the faint wash of stars, the green curtain of aurora, all became far more visible than they would be to eyes that hadn't acclimatized. At the same time, circadian rhythm stability, measured by the regularity of rest and activity cycles, decreased. Rest patterns became more fragmented. The body's internal schedule loosened. Melatonin levels at high Arctic latitudes peak in January, the depth of polar darkness, and reach their lowest in June. The pattern shows a phase delay in winter. The melatonin rhythm shifts later, with elevated levels persisting from midnight to 9 in the morning. The circadian system is trying to track a photoperiod that no longer exists, free running, untethered. But not everyone struggles. Some high-latitude residents report their best rest during the polar night. Arctic residents interviewed for a 2025 investigation described the darkness in striking terms. One said, "Polar night is too short. I wish it would last 2 months. I tend to feel more rested. I dread the arrival of spring." This aligns with an evolutionary logic. Human ancestors in cold, resource-scarce environments may have benefited from reduced activity and extended rest during months when foraging was unproductive. And there's a historical echo. A 1900 British medical journal report described a documented practice among Russian peasants in the Pskov region called Lotska. Entire families would gather around a stove at the first snowfall and enter a state of semi-hibernation. They'd rest through most of winter, rising once daily to eat a small piece of bread. Modern researchers are skeptical that this represented true physiological hibernation, but the practice illustrates how, behaviorally, humans have long sought to synchronize with winter's invitation to stillness. A 2024 meta-analysis of 18 studies involving 986 polar residents found something counterintuitive. Intense summer light actually has a demonstrably negative effect on rest time and efficiency. The darkness of polar winter, though it disrupts circadian timing, doesn't uniformly worsen rest quality, particularly for those who adopt protective habits. For nomadic Siberians, the stabilizing factor is the fixed routine of animal care. Reindeer must be fed, they must be checked, they must be gathered and moved at consistent intervals regardless of whether the sun is present. This external schedule serves as a social Zeitgeber, a time giver that partially substitutes for natural light, anchoring the community's rhythm even in total darkness. Research confirms that people who maintain structured daily schedules during polar darkness show less circadian drift than those on free schedules. The delay in mid-rest timing was less than half an hour on workdays, versus more than an hour on free days. The reindeer don't know they're setting the clock, but they are. When light-dark cycles disappear, other Zeitgebers become dominant. Temperature cycles, feeding patterns, social synchrony, physical activity. A herding family moving with their reindeer across the tundra is physically active at predictable times each day. They rest when the herd stops. They eat with the rhythms of the herd. These cycles impose circadian structure when the sun can't. Even during polar night, the tundra isn't absolutely dark. Twilight, even the atmospheric diffraction of sunlight from below the horizon, provides meaningful dim light in the midday hours. Moonlight and starlight get amplified by snow reflection into what Arctic residents call snow glow. By spending most of each day outdoors, following reindeer across open ground, Nenets herders maximize exposure to whatever natural light exists, even pale blue twilight at noon. A 2021 study involving over 400 participants confirmed that time spent in outdoor light, even low-intensity Arctic twilight, was associated with improved mood and circadian-related outcomes. The outdoor nomadic lifestyle is, whether by design or accident, a prescription for minimizing circadian drift. And there's a third stabilizing force. The social and spiritual structure of Nenets' life during the polar night is dense with purpose and scheduled ritual. The Tadabia, the shaman, performs rituals through singing and drumming. Communities gather for storytelling. The constant physical demands of herding create a social calendar that operates independently of light. The neurobiological importance of social synchrony as a secondary Zeitgeber is well established. Humans entrained to social schedules maintain more stable circadian rhythms than those living in social isolation. The nomadic community can't retreat indoors and dissolve into isolation. The reindeer demand attention every day, in darkness or light. The seasonal affective dimension is more nuanced than you might expect. In an Inuit community above 70 degrees north, formal assessment found seasonal affective disorder in 6.3% of respondents. Subsyndromal effects appeared in 11.7%. Any measurable seasonal effect on mood appeared in 39.6% of the sample. Cross-cultural studies in Finnish Lapland found that ethnic Lapps were less likely to exhibit seasonal affective symptoms than non-native Finns living at the same latitude. But a broad review concluded that only a small proportion of the variance in seasonal depression prevalence can be explained by biological acclimatization. Psychosocial health and community factors accounted for much larger proportions. Culture matters, connection matters, purpose matters. Darkness doesn't automatically produce despair. What produces despair is darkness without structure, darkness without purpose, darkness alone. The Nenets have none of those conditions. They have the herd, they have the chum, they have each other. Now let's move to something quieter still. The sound, or rather the absence of sound, on the winter tundra and what it does to the human brain. The Siberian tundra in deep winter is among the most acoustically quiet environments on Earth. Snow absorbs sound. Cold, dense air suppresses propagation. Animal activity near ceases. The wind, when it stops, leaves a silence so complete it has physical weight. For the nervous system of a human being evolved in a noisy social world, this silence isn't deprivation. It's a specific biological input with measurable neural consequences. The most direct neurological effect of silence is activation of the default mode network, a set of brain regions including the posterior cingulate cortex, medial prefrontal cortex, precuneus, and hippocampus. These regions become active precisely when external sensory demands fall away. The default mode network is the brain's internal processing mode. It consolidates memories. It supports self-reflection. It integrates emotional experiences. It generates the kind of diffuse, associative thinking from which creative insight emerges. Research published in Nature Neuroscience in 2025, conducted at the Forschungszentrum Jülich, revealed that the default mode network contains structurally distinct subregions. Some respond to sensory input. Others are deeply insulated from the outside world. The most insulated regions support the richest forms of introspective processing. Silence doesn't empty the brain, it fills it differently. A 2013 study on mice found that silence specifically stimulated neurogenesis in the hippocampus, the birth and maturation of new neurons in the brain's primary, memory-forming region, more effectively than white noise, ambient music, or structured sound. The mechanism appears to operate through reduced sensory overload, allowing precursor cells to differentiate and integrate into functional circuits. For nomadic Siberians spending months in near silence, this translates to a neurological environment chronically conducive to memory consolidation and emotional regulation. The effect extends to the stress axis. Quiet environments reduce cortisol production, the body's primary stress hormone, lowering blood pressure and heart rate. Chronic noise exposure is associated with elevated risk for cognitive decline. Silence helps restore cognitive resources depleted by continuous sensory input. The The default mode network's role in emotional regulation is particularly relevant on the tundra. During activation, the brain processes and integrates emotionally weighty experiences, including fear, social loss, and uncertainty. For communities facing genuine existential risk from cold, starvation, and isolation, the enforced silence of winter may paradoxically provide the neural conditions most conducive to processing fear and restoring psychological resilience. The 2025 EBRAINS study confirmed that the default mode network's introspective subsystems are most fully engaged when external stimulus load is minimal. The tundra in winter provides exactly that. Silence, snow, the low sound of reindeer breathing. Psychological resilience among Siberian nomads isn't simply a product of silence, though. It arises from the interplay between silence and structure. A behavioral comparison study published in 2023, examining Tuvan nomads living in yurts in Siberia, found that their daily movement and activity patterns during winter were characterized by rhythmic, predictable cycles of animal husbandry interspersed with extended periods of low-activity rest. This contrasts with modern sedentary lifestyles where cognitive load remains high even during rest. Screen exposure, notifications, ambient noise, social demands. The nomadic pattern is different. High physical demand followed by genuine cognitive quiet. Research on circadian stability consistently shows that fixed daily routines, feeding animals, maintaining fire, preparing food at consistent times, substitute for missing environmental time givers, and provide psychological as well as physiological anchoring. The predictable, repetitive nature of reindeer care tasks creates what attention restoration theory describes as fascination without mental effort. The light attentional engagement that most effectively restores directed attention capacity. The task isn't boring, it's rhythmic, and the rhythm is the medicine. Direct measurement of total energy expenditure in free-living Tuvan nomadic pastoralists during a Siberian winter, at a mean outdoor temperature of -27.4 degrees Celsius, found that these individuals burned far more energy per day than comparable sedentary populations. The combination of physical labor and cold-induced thermogenesis created a high-demand energy economy. But this high demand has a counterpart. After subsistence tasks are complete, there's a documented tendency toward extended rest and reduced discretionary activity. Winter in the nomadic world creates a natural pulse. High exertion followed by enforced metabolic recovery. A rhythm that maps closely onto what researchers describe as ideal recovery cycling. Let's return now to the body's deeper biology. There's a parallel between what happens in the reindeer and what happens in the herder, a convergence that spans the boundary between species. Humans don't hibernate, but winter physiology in cold-adapted populations shows meaningful parallels to the metabolic downregulation seen in hibernating mammals. Among the Yakut, the dramatic decline in free thyroid hormone levels during winter, despite elevated metabolic rate in younger adults, suggests a seasonal recalibration. The body shifts its metabolic strategy, generating more heat per unit of thyroid signal. This may occur through increased brown fat activity and improved peripheral thermogenic efficiency. The direction is the same as torpor, even if the magnitude is far smaller. The body isn't shutting down, but it's shifting gears. The Lotska accounts from 19th century Russia. While not scientifically verified as true physiological hibernation, document a behavioral tradition that compresses caloric expenditure across winter months by maximizing rest and minimizing movement. A 2020 study identified possible evidence of hibernation-like behaviors in hominin fossils from a Spanish cave, dated to approximately 400,000 years ago. The researchers found seasonal growth disruptions in bone consistent with metabolic dormancy. Whether genuine proto-hibernation or extreme behavioral conservation, the ecological logic is identical to what brown bears accomplish biologically. Reduce the mismatch between energy intake and energy demand. Cold asks the same question of every warm-blooded creature. Can you afford to stay warm? And every creature, across millions of years, has found its own answer. The reindeer found hollow hair, a countercurrent nose, and seasonal eye restructuring. The Nenets found the malitza, the chum, raw frozen liver, and the migration schedule. And the brown fat burning beneath both species, human and reindeer, connects them at the cellular level. UCP1 in the mitochondria, fatty acids crossing membranes, heat released into tissue, the same molecular machinery running in parallel in two bodies walking side by side across the same frozen ground. A separate Arctic adaptation documented in the indigenous peoples of the Sakha Republic is a form of what researchers call polar dyspnea. It's a shallow, controlled breathing pattern that warms inhaled air and protects the respiratory tract before it reaches the lungs. Nitric oxide-mediated vasodilation in muscular arteries, partially triggered by mild hypoxia that accompanies cold air inhalation, contributes to overall vascular regulation in these populations. The body learns the cold, not in a single lifetime, across hundreds of generations. Retinal sensitivity increases in people who overwinter in darkness, just as it does in reindeer. The human retina upregulates its sensitivity to catch every available photon. The dim glow of snow, stars, and aurora become more visible than they'd be to eyes not acclimatized. The parallel extends to metabolism. Reindeer slow their metabolic rate in winter, even when food is available. The Yakut show seasonally declining thyroid hormones. Both species downshift, both conserve. Both respond to the same small signal, the first faint change in twilight duration at the edge of polar night, to begin the slow climb back toward spring. Look at the system as a whole. At the cellular level, Yakut and Tuvan bodies carry genetic variants in UCP1 and UCP3 shaped by millennia of natural selection into more efficient thermogenic machines. At the vascular level, peripheral vessels stay open in the cold, preserving function and preventing injury. At the metabolic level, a seasonally elevated basal metabolic rate, powered by a highly activated brown fat system, maintains core temperature without the energetic waste of shivering. Their reindeer partners are no less refined. Nasal turbinates that recover 75 to 80% of respiratory heat and water. Eyes that restructure their photonic tapetum to match the exact spectral qualities of winter twilight. Metabolisms that throttle back without loss of function. Hooves that harden into ice picks when the ground freezes. The relationship between herder and reindeer isn't merely economic. It isn't merely spiritual. It's a convergence of two cold-adapted biological systems whose rhythms, vulnerabilities, and adaptations have evolved in tandem across thousands of years. The herder wears the reindeer's fur, eats the reindeer's liver, follows the reindeer's schedule, And the reindeer, in turn, follows the herder's migration routes, routes refined across generations to reach the best pasture at the right time, to cross rivers at their safest points, to shelter in valleys when the wind is strongest. Neither survives alone. And the silence that envelops this system, the profound acoustic stillness of the winter tundra, isn't an obstacle to psychological health. From a neuroscientific perspective, it's one of its primary supports, suppressing the stress axis, activating the default mode network, promoting hippocampal neurogenesis, creating the neural space in which memory consolidates, emotions integrate, and the mind finds its own form of winter rest. For thousands of years, long before synthetic insulation or central heating, the Nenets solved the same thermodynamic problems that modern engineers solve with polymers and powered systems. They solved them using geometry, animal biology, and careful observation of airflow. The hollow hair of the reindeer, the conical mathematics of the chum, the biochemistry of raw liver, these aren't primitive solutions. They are precise adaptations refined across generations, each one a quiet answer to a question the cold keeps asking. Chinese researchers reverse-engineered the hollow hair into graphene aerogel fibers. Russian scientists proposed the malitsa as a design template for military Arctic protective equipment. Defense agencies in Canada conducted formal thermal testing of indigenous-made garments for cold weather military applications. The knowledge flows both ways now, but for a very long time it flowed in only one direction, from the tundra to the people who walked it. The Nenets didn't need peer review. They had the tundra, and the tundra isn't a forgiving reviewer. Tonight, as you settle into warmth, consider that somewhere on the Yamal Peninsula, a family is resting inside a cone of reindeer hides. A small fire burns at the center. Smoke rises through a carefully adjusted opening into air that is 60 or 70 degrees colder than the space where they lie. The same physics that holds their warmth in place holds yours. The same biology that lets their bodies generate heat from fat and protein is working in you now, quietly. As your own metabolism hums along at its own pace, converting the day's fuel into the warmth that keeps your core at 37 degrees. The hollow hairs of the malitsa trap still air against skin. Your blanket traps still air against yours. Different scale, same physics. Somewhere a reindeer stands in the dark, snow on its back, unmelted. Its nose warms each breath before it reaches the lungs, recovering 75% of the heat it spent. Its eyes, shifted to deep blue, scan the snow for lichen in ultraviolet light we can't see. Somewhere, a herder checks the edge of the herd in twilight that isn't quite darkness. The default mode network in the herder's brain is quietly active, processing the day, consolidating memory, integrating the quiet stress of responsibility for 2,000 animals in a place that offers no margin for error. The fire crackles, the hide walls hold, and the cold outside is patient. It was patient 1,000 years ago. It will be patient 1,000 years from now. It doesn't hurry. It doesn't relent. It simply asks its question every night, every winter. Can you hold your heat? And the Nenets, generation after generation, answer. Not with force, not with defiance. With geometry, with chemistry, with observation. With the fur of the animal that walks beside them, and the fire at the center of a cone of hides, and the raw frozen liver eaten before the warmth of cooking can destroy the molecule that lets the body burn its fat. The cold is patient, but so are the people who have learned to live inside it. And tonight, that is enough. Rest now. The herd is still, the fire is low. The smoke rises through the opening and vanishes into cold air, carrying the last light of the day upward into a sky full of stars the reindeer can see, in colors we cannot name. Good night.